Get the inside track on 20 top business trends for 2020 from Joel Block. Joel's insights bring Wall Street to your street so you can profit from the inside in 2020. Just text the word TREND to 72000. That's 72000 and download your free copy today. Grab your phone and get the inside track on business trends that affect you and your business. Just text the word TREND to 72000 for your copy now. This is Profit from the Inside with Joel Block. Insights to give your business the inside track. And now, here's your host, Joel Block.
Do you ever wonder why some companies run like a well-oiled machine while others have poor engagement and a revolving door? To answer that question, Robert Grossman. Robert, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Joel, and I'm really excited to be on your podcast.
Hey, well, listen, man, thanks very much. And so what is it about great companies? What are great companies, those well-oiled machine companies? I mean, we see these companies. What are they doing that's working that other companies are not doing?
Well, I think Peter Drucker said it best when he said culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think companies that are really high performing and doing great, they very much so focus on their culture. They develop their leaders to be high performance leaders. They work on things like their emotional intelligence and their communication skills. And they create teams that are also high performing teams.
I'm with you on this. I mean, I agree, but there's a lot of CEOs and a lot of, chair people or whoever they are. Mm-hmm. And this just doesn't come natural to them. I mean, so if this doesn't come natural to you and like leading people isn't kind of part of your thing, you got to do it. But, how do you kind of help people that are not natural culture, nice people like that,
I think a lot of us, especially older CEOs, older leaders, are still stuck in the way companies were run when our parents were in the workforce, and it was command and control. You show up to work, you go to your corner, your desk, you do the work you're supposed to do, and then you leave. And you didn't question, you didn't participate, you just did your work. And so oftentimes I'm asked by people, senior people, how do I manage millennials, for example? How do I get them to work the way I want them to work? And my immediate response is, you're not. And if you try, you're going to have a very disruptive culture. You're going to have to change the way that you lead, especially with the new generations coming up. So we start to develop people. First thing is usually we develop people in emotional intelligence. We help them understand that in order for them to stay on their A game, they have to manage their emotions. I mean, it's like, Joel, when something happens and you get upset about something, a lot of people want to act it out, right? They want to yell or they want to.
They can't help it.
They can't help it, right? It's like on autopilot. Right. So, and I used to do that too when, before I started studying emotional intelligence. Well, I recognized that wasn't working very, very well. In fact, I have some great stories that I tell about, I was producing large events and I would get upset. Well, the results were pretty poor from those meetings. So we develop people in emotional intelligence. We help them understand that when something happens, we call it a key moment or a triggering event, that typically they're emotionally charged in that moment. And so we first teach them how to hit the pause button, and to recognize that they're having an emotional response, and then they need to engage their rational brain. They need to think about what's going on, and then they can respond to the situation.
I mean, so do you think that these high-performing companies, people have a little bit more self-control about their emotions? I mean, at the CEO level and also at the team level?
I think that they do. I think that they're developed in these areas, or they're just naturally more inclined to manage their emotions. But I'll give you an example. I was referred into a company that had a 60% turnover rate.
Wow.
60%. The ratings on Glassdoor were horrible. And some of the ratings were things like, well, we don't know who's going to walk out of the office. Somebody started new this morning, and by 10 o'clock, they left crying. Because the CEO just was not She was out of control. And when I asked the CEO, do you think has anything to do with your leadership style? She said, absolutely not. Right? It's not me, it's them. And I ended up turning down that engagement because what I realized is that she just wasn't coachable.
Yeah.
So does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, listen, if she's in total denial and she's not open to any other perspective, then yeah, you're wasting your time.
Yeah, I think also leaders are starting to realize that the old way of doing business just doesn't work anymore.
Well, I heard something really interesting about this. One of my very nice friends is a generational expert, and they were saying that like our parents, who we learned from, kind of grew up in the shadow of World War II, which is that military command and control. Our grandparents, right. That you'd work somewhere for 30 years and we've kind of grown away from that. But there's a generational explanation that makes a lot of sense about why the world was. And the people that work for us, I guess, are just not responding to those things, although that's kind of what we're used to. So how do we get used to something new? I mean, how do you recondition?
Well, so first I want to just talk about what you just said, that the command and control structure or the current organizational design that we're using was actually created like in the 1920s, right? And what was interesting about, or what was different about the work back then than it is today, is that most people went into a factory and they did their job. They pulled the lever, they punched the button, whatever they did over and over and over again. They rarely collaborated with other people. Well, that's changed dramatically, especially since the invention of the internet, right? Now we're knowledge workers. And so the old style of doing business doesn't work in today's environment. So what do? First, we have to get them to acknowledge that what they're doing today is not effective. And usually they see that after talking with them for a little while. And then we take them through some work. Either it's going to be one-to-one coaching, or it's going to be workshops where we teach them a whole new way of leadership, where as a leader, you lead from the balcony, right? You empower your members, your team members, to collaborate and do work together. And the results are just so much better. Every single person in that type of environment is typically engaged in the process.
We had a guest on the podcast here just recently. They were talking about how every employee, say at Ritz-Carlton, is empowered to spend a certain amount of money to solve problems or whatever it is that they need to do. But a lot of companies, middle-sized companies who we really address, it makes them nervous to think, well, gee, what if my people waste money? Or how do you help the CEO through that to trust their people a little more?
Well, we have them take baby steps, right? We don't throw the switch and say, okay, yesterday you were command and control and today you're high performance. So we develop them slowly over time, and we identify areas where they can begin to give up a little bit of control and gain trust. It's also about how CEOs delegate too, or leaders delegate. Most people are very poor at delegating, right? They don't think of delegating as a way to develop people. They think of it as getting stuff off their desk. And so they don't set up the proper structures of check-in and communication methodology and the requirements around it. So
what about
taking these small baby steps, it works.
What about hiring? I mean, hiring's got to play a big role in this. I mean, if you don't hire good people, then you can't get them going the way you want it.
That's correct. And it harkens back to get the right people on the bus, right? Make sure you have the right people on the bus. And many of our clients use an assessment tool called the P60 that I provide, and that allows them to have a peek into the personality of the people that they're hiring, and to make sure that they're going to be put into the right position in their organizations. And so the hiring process is tricky, especially now because there's a pretty shallow pool of qualified employees.
Well, apparently there's not a lot of people available, and if a lot of people are not available, then the number of people who are really good has got to be pretty little.
Very, very small. It's a big problem right now, actually.
Yeah.
And so the other side of this, Joel, is, how do you retain your employees as well? And that's where creating a high performance organization comes into play, is retaining your top quality people.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. If beside compensation, if you don't create an environment where people enjoy what they do and feel good about what they do, and that old command and control not being there anymore, these young people who want to have more self-fulfillment, all this other stuff, if you don't have that good environment, people aren't sticking around.
Yeah, it's also now coming out that having all kinds of great food and ping pong tables and pool tables and bring your dog to work day, it's important, but it doesn't create a high performance culture. A leader, I'll use an example of my old company when I was producing meetings and events. And we were doing a big meeting at a big hotel here in Los Angeles. And we had a lunch break, and I went out and I brought in really good food for the crew. Right? And the guy who was directing the crew said, "Why are you doing that? You're going to spoil them." Well, I didn't like that attitude. My attitude was, these are the people, they're part of my team. And my performance is going to be as strong as the weakest link on my team. So I wanted to know that they were appreciated. I valued their input. And I took care of them. I really took care of them. And the level of performance that I got from people was extraordinary.
That the word spoil kind of harkens back to that command and control.
Mm-hmm.
It really, it's what's interesting that I heard you say 5 minutes ago was that there's the command and control and there's the high performance, and they're totally different styles. And there probably are a few other ones. So what is the style of high performance? Because there's a bunch of things, there's a bunch of directions we can go here.
Sure.
How would you define it? What is it?
So a high-performance organization has a very clear vision and direction for their company, and that is communicated consistently throughout the whole organization. So going back to the example you gave where they had a certain amount of money to spend on problems, that is what a high-performance organization, that's one thing that they would do in order to support their employees to be able to deliver a high level of customer support and service. There also, as we mentioned, there's leadership and there's and the structure of a company. So leaders move away from being command and control, barking orders, to engagement and conversations and helping them understand their role. Today's generation, they want to understand what their role is in fulfilling on the company's mission. If they don't understand that, if there's a disconnect for them, they're going to be less engaged. So we also have to teach communication skills and a relatively new area, which is called psychological safety on teams, which is psychological safety is when each team member feels that they can have direct and candid conversations without any fear of being criticized or reprimanded. And that is leading to high performance as well.
God, that's got to be a big topic these days. I mean, that's even in families and even in personal relationships. I mean, you say something to somebody, they don't respond the way you want, then you don't keep confiding anymore because you don't get the style of feedback you want. Yeah, I mean, how do you? I mean, is there like a technique for someone to listen, take a deep breath, and not be overly emotional? So I guess this whole emotional intelligence thing ties into, not overreacting and making people feel safe, right, so that they can confide.
Yeah. And the technique is to teach listening. Listening is such a huge part of communicating. And, sometimes when you're talking with somebody, this is very common actually, as they're talking, you're not even really listening. You're formulating your response before they're even done.
Yeah, that's right? Unfortunately, that's what happens. Yeah,
right, and that's where miscommunication happens all the time. So, if a leader has a reputation of barking orders or not listening or being highly emotional or not being predictable, it's not predictable how they're going to show up every day and even minute by minute, then there's a lack of trust, which is also another major component of high-performance teams. High-performance leadership is trust. So one of the things that we work on is, how do you listen? And how do you help them understand that you understand what they're saying? Right? So Some people would know that as parroting back what the question was or what their answer was. But you got to go a little bit deeper than just parroting back. You try to get the intention behind it. So an example might be, a manager or leader might say to an employee, okay, well, you did a great job here, but you made a mistake over there. What happened? Right? The employee says, well, I just didn't understand the process, but I went ahead and I did it anyways. And so the leader might say back, okay, so I get that you really want to do a great job. You're motivated to do a great job and you took action. And the action didn't work out the way that we wanted it to. What are some steps that you could take next time to ensure that the actions you take are more in line with what we need to accomplish? Do you see the difference?
Yeah, I totally see the difference. And, here's what's kind of on my mind here is that some people are sensitive to other people. Mm-hmm. Many people are not very sensitive to other people. And so forget about being at work. This is just not their style in their life. And I would imagine that this is not an easy skill to learn. I mean, it's a critical skill, but I imagine it's not that easy. What do you think?
Well, the first question I always ask them is, so how's that working for you?
And what do they say? Are they honest?
Are you getting the results that you want?
When you ask them, when you kind of point the finger at their style, are they honest? Do they tell you the truth?
So if they say, well, my style was perfect, it's all their fault, my next question is, are you coachable? Right? And I have leaders who say, no, I'm not. And I say, okay, then we're done here. Right? There's nothing I can do to help you be a better leader and a better communicator if you're not coachable. So if they say something and I say, well, no, my communication style is fine, or this is the way I do things. If I ask them, how's that working for you? And they say, oftentimes they'll say, not very well. It really is not working for me. And I said, okay, so what's not working for you? And then they'll say, well, I'm not getting the results I want. So then we'll back it down. We'll take a look at it. And then we'll begin to identify what's not working for them. But they have to be coachable. They have to want to change.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's part of the sales process is really helping people understand, what the impact of their actions are that's not working. And that's not necessarily easy to do.
Yeah. I'd love to share a quick story with you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So as I was going through the certification process for doing this work, this is about 2008. I had my meeting production company. I was doing an event for one of my clients, Deloitte. It was an award show. And I've been doing this event for 10 years in a row. And I had it down pat. But one year we were doing the event down in San Diego and everything was set up. And I was sitting in the back of the room on my tech riser going over the show flow when the maitre d' came up to me and said, your pipe and drape doesn't look good here. Okay, there's a big gaping hole. We can see all the cables. Now, this is about 2 hours before the doors opened. And man, Joel, I got so pissed off. I mean, I was seeing red.
Why?
I don't know. I just got really mad. Well, I know why. Because I knew the hole was there. The gaping hole was there. I didn't do anything about it at that time. And I was pissed that I was being called out.
So you were kind of embarrassed.
I was embarrassed, right.
Yeah.
And I was having a key moment. And I was no longer on my A game. So I looked at him and I said, in the nastiest voice possible, I'll take care of it. Don't worry. Right. And he goes, good. And he begins to walk away and he looks over his shoulder at me again. And I said, what is your problem? And he looked at me and yelled, nothing. What's your problem? Right. So we started having this little interaction. And then I stood up to really yell at him. And I noticed that my client was in the room, in the front of the room at one of the banquet tables going over her presentation. So I sat down and my audio engineer looked at me and said, don't worry, Robert, I'll take care of this. And I sat down and I thought, I'm having a key moment here and I don't want to go this way. I'm going to hit the pause button. I almost did something that probably would have had consequences that would have been very severe, like losing my best client. And so after I calmed myself down, I walked over to him and tapped him on the shoulder and, said, hey, my name is Robert and I'm the event producer. I've been doing this for 10 years and I bet you and I have the same objective. We want our mutual client to have a great time. He looks at me and goes, what, really? And I said, yeah, right? And he said, yeah, that's what I want too. I said, great. We fixed the pipe and drape, come back and take a look at it, which shocked the hell out of him. But he came back there and he said, "This looks great, Robert." And I said, "Great, thank you for pointing it out to us." And we shook hands, and I went back to my job. He went back to his. 5 minutes later, he comes up to me and says, "Hey, Robert, I want to go over the schedule with you. Should we move this here, move there? We'll be that, blah, 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 blah." So in that moment, we became a team.
Yeah. And, our egos don't always, they're not always our friend, I guess. Huh?
No, they're not. No, they're not.
And that's really, it's unfortunate that, we let that get in the way, because if you're in the service business, you're there to serve your client. That hotel's there to serve their client, the vendors, all the other vendors, everybody's kind of got the same objective. You're pretty much all on the same side of the table. You just don't necessarily realize it. So, all right. So look, so as an executive coach, how do you get people to step outside themselves and see that they're not being very nice? I mean, how do you do that?
Well, I keep going back to, it's the questions that we ask, and it's taking that questioning process usually far deeper than a CEO has ever gone through in the past. But once we can get them to identify, even at the most basic level, that their communication style is not working, that they're being emotionally triggered by something, then I have a crack in the door to leverage. Then I can put my fingers in the door and begin to open it up. And we teach a very specific process, a model on managing your key moments. And once they identify that, that they're being triggered, and the result of them being triggered usually sets up more key moments, we then help them understand, like what paradigm are they experiencing the key moment through. There are 4 basic paradigms. There's fear, there's duty, there's achievement, and integrity. We're not going to go into those. We don't have time for that. But when they understand that, then they understand the meaning they assign to their key moment. And then the meaning usually informs their feelings, right? And then the feelings usually cause the behavior. And depending on how they behave, either they're becoming more emotionally intelligent, or they're going down the pathway of survival. So most people are used to the survival pathway.
So let me just try to recap a couple things. So we're talking about high performance. We're talking about these like the culture of high performance, and you were talking about emotional intelligence. You're talking about psychological safety. What are the other components? Are there other components of a high performance environment?
Absolutely.
What are some other ones?
Building trust is critical, and communication is critical. Managing those critical conversations in a productive way, not in a aggressive way. And then there's the part about the strategy of the organization. So if the mission and vision of a company is not clear to the employees, if it's not clear from the top down, I'll give you an example of that. If you ever read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, there's a section in there where he talks about how even the maid had a little card, and on the front was her personal mission statement, and on the back was her manager's mission statement. And then he went to the manager, and the manager had his mission statement on the front, and then his manager's mission statement on the back. And that went up the chain. So there was a consistency across the entire hotel employee pool of how they're going to treat their customers. And that is a great example of high performance. He didn't call it high performance when he wrote the book, but that is high performance. That's making sure that the vision and mission of the organization is trickled down. A lot of companies say, well, we got a mission statement, and they put it up on the wall. Right, and it becomes the wall candy, or people start to ignore it because they're not living it.
Well, the other thing is that those statements tend to be so complex and blah 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 that nobody even knows what they mean.
Yeah. The great example of also very effective mission statements. When in the 60s, NASA said that we're going to be the leaders in space exploration. That doesn't mean anything to anybody. What does that mean? Kennedy said, we're going to put a man on the moon.
Yeah.
Right. So,
yeah.
By the way, we would call that a wig, a wildly important goal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, those, when you use very concrete language, it really is intentional. It really goes a long way, which is awesome.
Well, perception, the whole idea of assuming and perception is very dangerous, right? Because you and I could look at the same exact thing and we'll see two different things. In fact, one of the examples is that like Warsaw type test of a old woman and a young woman in one picture. And some people can see the young woman, people can only see the older woman. So how are different people seeing very different things, but they're looking at the same exact picture?
Yeah.
And that's perception.
Yeah. Well, listen, and, perception is reality, which is why you have to have, good behavior, good standards, good, all these things good. So, so you got this framework of emotional intelligence, psychological safety, building trust, communication. Is there any one that is the most important, or if you don't have one, the whole thing falls apart? How does it work?
They're pretty interdependent on each other. I think that where it needs to start, though, is developing leaders and managers and employees in emotional intelligence. I think that's the starting point, because you really can't have effective communication if you're being triggered by everything the other person is saying. And trust really can't be built if they don't trust how other people are going to respond to situations in the work environment. So I think it starts with emotional intelligence. Psychological safety is not an organizational intervention. It's a team level intervention. So that can be done at a later time. Trust is an organizational structure. So leaders have to be developed first in emotional intelligence and trust and how to communicate. Because if they're doing something different, nothing's going to happen down below.
Yeah.
Right? And that's, I think when you come back to your first question, where I answered, when Peter Drucker said culture eats strategy for lunch, that is so important to developing a good culture in an organization.
It just seems to me like if you got a boss that's kind of high strung and the person's got a short fuse, so they don't have good, emotional intelligence, but the employee doesn't feel psychologically safe. Like they feel like they can be yelled at, or they feel like they can have all different kind of problems, and that just doesn't work. I kind of get that these things all work together, and then trust is a whole other topic. I mean, that's for a different day, and we've discussed this on our show. How do companies know that that things aren't working? Like, what are some of the symptoms of a company that's broken?
Yeah. So some very, very clear symptoms. Number one, turnover goes up. Number two, people start showing up late. They're doing the bare minimum work. You're not getting any of that discretionary effort from people. Not another symptom. More customer service complaints might be a symptom of a culture that's not working. Loss of productivity, diminished profits. These are all indicative of a bad culture.
What's interesting, every single one of those is specific, but accountants don't keep track of all those things.
That's correct.
So they don't always show up on financial reports. So you kind of have to read between the lines. I mean, listen, if profit goes down, if sales goes down, if margins, change, those things are obvious. But, you don't see that right away. So people have to kind of look beyond the financial statements and look at some other things.
Yeah, so you can look and see, was it environmental? Has the market changed? Or is something not working right within our culture? And just because you have high turnover or more customer complaints is not necessarily indicative of a poor culture. There could be something else at play. But those are definitely signs that there very well might be a problem with employee engagement and culture of the organization.
Yeah. How do you, and now you throw the word employee engagement. If you have these other things, that still doesn't mean your employees are engaged. That means that they're not being put off or pushed away, But now that let's say you have a good environment, how do you draw your people in and engage them in a positive way?
Well, employees today, they want to do work that's meaningful and helps move the company forward. And so if you put an employee in a silo working by themselves and they don't connect to the greater company mission statement or the greater the vision of the company, then they're not going to be as engaged as we might want them to be. That's one example. Another way to draw people in is to be curious about their opinions, and don't diminish or don't push off their suggestions. That kind of goes into psychological safety now, right? That employees, who is closest to a company's customers, the CEO or the customer service agents?
Yeah, customer service, sales,
right?
The people that are customer facing.
Yeah. All the frontline people, they're the closest. So they probably have a much better insight to what's going on than somebody in the C-suite, because they never engage with customers. But yet those people on the front line are rarely asked, do you have suggestions or how can we work on this? They're not part of committees. It's done more at a leadership and managerial level. Another mistake that companies make, especially in sales departments, is they take a top performing salesperson and put them into a managerial position without giving them any training and development in how to work with people. So 9 out of 10 times when that happens, the sales manager fails. And that's true across an entire company.
What's clear and obvious is that companies that are great, it didn't happen by coincidence. And really, this is the inside track. I mean, what we're talking about is the best, smartest, and fastest way to be a great company. You have to train your people. It's got to be a top priority for your executives. I mean, all the things that you just said, that you have to have your emotional intelligence and your psychological safety, and all your things have to be in order. And, listen, I'm with you on this. And I wish that more companies were better so that more companies could help all the people in their community take better care of their families. And that's really what the entrepreneur, the medium-sized business world's about, is really spreading the wealth.
That's right. Richard Branson said it beautifully when he said, your first priority is not to take care of your customers, it's to take care of your employees. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of your customers.
Yeah, well, listen, the way I kind of say something kind of similar is that business is not about money, business is about people.
That's right.
And, if you take care of your people will make you money. So,
that's right.
Listen, man, thank you very much for being on the show. I really appreciate you sharing your insights, and, we'll publish your information on the show notes so people can, connect with you if they want to. But I really appreciate you, sharing and, being part of the program.
Thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. Wonderful.
All right, man. Listen, Robert, thanks very much, and I appreciate your friendship.
Thanks, Joel. Me too.
You've been listening to Profit from the Inside with Joel Block. For more insights and to learn more, visit joelblock.com.
How about a shout out and a giant thanks to my podcast producer, David Wolf, and his team at Podcast and Radio Networks. Profit from the Inside simply wouldn't be what it is without David and his team. For more information or to learn how you can launch and produce your own podcast, reach out to podcastandradio.com.
Get the inside track on 20 top business trends for 2020 from Joel Block. Joel's insights bring Wall Street to your street so you can profit from the inside in 2020. Just text the word TREND to 72000. That's 72000 and download your free copy today. Grab your phone and get the inside track on business trends that affect you and your business. Just text the word TREND to 72000 for your copy now.